Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It is exactly 9:15, and we're now going to be talking with Zaakirah Vadi from Defend Our Democracy. Now, they are calling for an end to the bombardment of Gaza. Defend Our Democracy goes on to say the call of hundreds of thousands of ordinary people across the globe for an immediate end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. They go also on to say it is simply unconscionable that the UN could not come to an agreement, well, the UN Security Council, of course, could not come to an agreement on an issue as fundamental and human as getting in aid to ordinary civilians. And I think there's much, much more, Zakira, regarding the bombardment of hospitals, which are supposed to be a safe haven, and religious institutions like mosques and churches. Salamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the program, Zakira. Nice talking with you.
Walaikum assalam, Zaakirah, for having me on your show.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. This is absolutely horrendous, isn't it? I never imagined that it would get this far. I'm kind of wondering, what do you guys at Defend Our Democracy? I know you've put out a very strong statement and we're going to talk about it, but did you ever imagine that this is the level it's going to reach? And the world, the Western world, is still um, they still, I guess, paralyzed as far as this is concerned, or they seem to think it's okay and they seem to think it's normal. Zakira.
Certainly, I mean, when you look in your history textbooks, if you're in school and you're studying and you learn about the Rwandan genocide, and at some point in your life you read about the Bosnian genocide, and you think to yourself, how did the world allow this to happen? What were people thinking at the time for this to unfold right before their eyes? And today we have the advantage of having social media and of having TV crews on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank as well. And we are seeing this unfold before our eyes. Yet we find a similar situation where it's simply allowed to happen. And you have, hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world coming out and protesting. But at the same time, those in significant positions of power in governments in different parts of the world aren't taking the necessary steps needed to bring an end to the bombardment of Gaza.
Okay, Zankira, can you hear me clearly? Because the line is not very clear, as you speaking. I just want to know if you can hear me
Okay,
clearly.
I can hear you very clearly, but I can also hear myself repeating on the line as well. So I think there is a problem with the line.
Yeah, possibly the weather. Okay, so we're seeing this terrible genocide taking place in Gaza, and the Western world or the global North seems to be quite or choose to be oblivious to the situation. And I kind of wonder, you speak about Rwanda and other such issues. And when you were at school, you kind of wondered why was the whole world chose to ignore those situations. And yet it seems that history repeats itself. Is it once again a situation of the white, black, and brown divide? Because it's black and brown people involved here, that the rest of the world or the global north is not interested. It's not their problem. It's not their issue. And also the fact that we've had Israeli heads of, ministers and even Netanyahu himself calling Palestinians animals. Where and how do people in such high positions stoop to a level of hurling insults and dehumanizing other people by calling them animals? What gives them the right to do that? Are they then not the animals? Because this is the levels they've stooped to, Zakira?
I don't think we should ever call another human being an animal, irrespective of who that is. My own reading is that it boils down to a very fundamental colonial thinking, a thinking embedded in deeply racist views. And it's same kind of justification that was used to colonize Africa previously, various parts of the East, where people thought that they were better than others, and that they needed to civilize uh, a different part of the world. And if you heard Benjamin Netanyahu's speech yesterday, he was saying that this is for the Israelis a war for civilization. He used the word barbarism, so terming militants within Gaza as being barbaric. And when words like that are used, it really begins to pave the way for genocide. It paves the way for all sorts of war crimes. If we look at the Rwandan situation again, there it was an ethnic division. So everyone in Rwanda comes from the African continent. They're all of a similar skin color, but it's ethnicity that played a role between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And in that particular war, you had one calling the other words like cockroaches. That took root. And when that dehumanization takes place, it becomes easier to kill another human being, torture another human being, because you think that they are less than yourself. And we see this, consistently throughout history where there have been massacres. It is always preceded with a sense of dehumanization. The second point, though, is that there is a trend in the world, which I think has been there historically, but we're also seeing today, where it does seem that people who are black or brown, or do not have blonde hair and blue eyes, perhaps are less regarded both within the media and by governments in some instances. So it's okay for children of a particular skin color, of a particular religion, or a particular ethnicity to die en masse, rather than perhaps children in a European country. And we've seen the different responses to the war in Ukraine and currently the bombardment of Gaza and Palestine. And I think we've seen similar responses. If you look at what's playing out in Sudan at the moment, we see a similar sort of apathy from the rest of the world to try and bring into the violence compared to other parts of the world. So I think it does beg the question about innate racism and innate colonial values that still exist in the world today.
Should our government be doing more and having a stronger voice regarding all of this dehumanization and genocide taking place in Gaza and Palestine as a
I
whole?
think our government has taken a particularly strong stance, which is very important, particularly for the African continent. We know that Israel has been trying to make inroads into the African continent over the last few years, economically and otherwise. Whether or not a government chooses to take a stronger stance, I think, and particularly our government, is yet to be seen. We would certainly encourage governments to be taking a stronger stance, because when there's this level of crisis in another country and almost an oblivion to the calls of the rest of the world, the calls of the UN to implement, even at the very least, a humanitarian ceasefire, then it does call for further action by governments around the world. I think our government would have to deliberate and see what particular action can be taken further. We know that our country, for example, does not necessarily have the kind of power that a country like the US may have in the situation, but nonetheless, it can exert moral authority, and it should certainly consider doing so.
So, Zaakirah, you at Defend Our Democracy has put out this press statement calling for an end to the bombardment of Gaza. Um, were you expecting responses? Whom does this go to, apart from media houses, to engage with the public and to engage with you to hear how we move forward? But do these statements go out to government departments, to embassies, particularly the Israeli embassies, Israeli institutions in South Africa? And do you expect a response from them?
So these statements are public statements. They are meant to create awareness in the broader public. For an organization like Defend Our Democracy that has affiliates with it, it's important that we bring other organizations into the same sort of or similar sort of awareness that I think many of us would have been more familiar with over time. Having come from an organization like the Zaakirah Foundation, for instance,
Mm.
that has been very vocal on the issue. So that I think was the first sort of outcome for Defend Our Democracy, that other organizations in the process become conscientized. Secondly, it is about making a moral statement in every organization in some way or the other that has links to issues of democracy, is involved in work around human rights, I think has the responsibility to pronounce on this issue. And this was part of the role of Defend Our Democracy in this instance. I suppose organizations, we are not deliberately sending it out to different embassies, to media people, and I mean government people. I think they would probably get the sense of it through the news. It would with a bunch of other statements from organizations across the board, so humanitarian organizations, and even the UN in this case. However, we as Defend Our Democracy do think that there is a necessity to carry through with some of the activations. So some of our members have been part of different protests that have been taking place. They're involved in different initiatives that are underway, and there's a range of them, one of which is, repositioning the whole issue of apartheid and Israeli apartheid and bringing that to the fore. And our chairperson, Reverend Moss, is part of that initiative at this point in time. So I think that from an organization and even generally the sense that getting in the news is that this issue is not something that's going to fold up and close in a week. It's something that's going to be long-term. It's going to require long-term activism. And from the broader public, the organizations who are at the fore of doing this work, and there are a number of Palestinian solidarity organizations in our country, we must really see how best to support the initiative and how to back their work.
Inshallah. And one last thing, we've seen a lot of protest marches all around the country, and I should imagine it's going to be ongoing. And it has to be, because I think the whole world needs to understand that civil society is rising up against these atrocities. Do you partner with other organizations to have these marches, to introduce them and make sure that they, spread the word as wide as you possibly can? Because thus far, Alhamdulillah, the marches have truly had lots and lots of support, because they do send out a very strong statement, do they not?
We must. I think there is a need to continue protesting in other parts of the world. We've seen, crowds of 100,000, 300,000 coming out. In South Africa, we haven't seen marches on that scale as yet, and it's something that we need to build towards. However, the responsibility in South Africa of a range of organizations, both those that are doing Palestinian solidarity work, but even more broadly, is really to educate others about what this is really about. It's really to draw the linkages between apartheid, our own experiences of apartheid, and our own experience of what is needed for a just negotiation or a just transition to take place. Be reminded of the words of Nelson Mandela, where he says that basically you can't have peace in a situation where there's continued discrimination, there's continued apartheid, there's continued policies that seem to repress people. You can never have a peace, because that peace won't be just. And that's really what we need to be advocating for in our country and calling for consistency, that for there to be peace in the Middle East, there has to be justice and there has to be dignity for all.
Inshallah, we hope and pray that Defend Our Democracy and all such organizations continue to put out these type of messages into the broader public, and people then understand what exactly the genocide is all about. Who is on the right or the wrong side of history? We need to conscientize people, because I think way too many people. I mean, I was very shocked. You might have been too, where there's a lot of Black African voices that are supporting Israel's stance on this genocide. And I kind of ask myself the question, what sort of narratives were handed down in their families, in their communities, regarding South Africa under apartheid? Because they do need to draw those parallels, don't they?
I don't think it's necessarily limited to a particular race group. I think there's this general lack of awareness about the history of the issue. What are the kind of religious teachings that are taught within religious institutions in the country across the board? It's important to remember and I think consistently emphasize that this is not it's not about one religious group against another religious group. It's fundamentally a human rights issue. And as you started this interview saying that there have been mosques that have been bombed, there have been churches that have been bombed, and throughout the world we are seeing many Jewish people come out and protest calling for an end to the genocide. And I think anyone who stands for human rights to be able to see what's taking place and should make their voice heard on the issue.
Thank you indeed, Zaakirah Vadi, and we'll always make sure that your people's voices defend our democracy is also heard. Whenever you issue a statement, we're very keen to talk with you to understand what exactly the issue is at hand, and we salute you guys at Defend Our Democracy for speaking up for the rights of the undertrodden. Thank you once again. Go well, and salamu alaikum to you.
Assalamu alaikum.
9:31 news and views on Salam Media, and in a minute or two we are going to be talking with Riyadh and Samira Sattar. They're going to talk about Stand for Freedom. It's an awareness campaign. Let's understand what it's all about. It actually happened yesterday. So are they going to be having more of these? And what does it mean? And where is it playing out, inshallah? So do stay with us.
Have myself as an owner so integrally tied to the business, it can create certain problems. I have been accused by certain elements of the Muslim community for being, quote unquote, the biggest donor to the Israeli army. Well, firstly, we're proud to be a bigger donor to Israel, but to my knowledge, our company has never given to anyone outside South Africa. And in my personal capacity, we have donated funds indeed for humanitarian purposes in Israel. And we're very particular about that. So we had a demonstration on Saturday morning outside our waterfront store, screaming down with Cape Union, marked down with Philip Kravitz, all sorts of accusations, and that's what you've got to put up with. But I just want to make it perfectly clear. I will never, ever be ashamed of being a Jew. I'm a very proud Jew. I will never, ever be ashamed of my support for the State of Israel, because I believe in the existence of the State of Israel with all my heart. And as far as I'm concerned, the challenges that come to us, and I think we will face more in South Africa, have to be met head on, as we will do.
Yep, the words of Philip Kravitz defending his stance in his support of Israel. And as Dr. Alan Busak has also said earlier on, that, and I'm not quite sure what to make of the statement by Philip Kravitz. He was quite ambiguous in what he had said there. It wasn't as clear cut as I would have liked it to have been, but be that as it may, you can read into it what you will. He hasn't mentioned but he hasn't mentioned the killings of innocent men, women, and children. He hasn't mentioned anything about the bombings of hospitals, mosques, and churches. And these are the issues we are highlighting here on Salam Media. Um, you know, Good for you if you're a upstanding Jewish man, and we also are cognizant of the fact that not all Jews support the genocide. There's an organization of Jewish people all around the world, and the organization is called Not in Our Name. And we salute you because you're indicating that you are humanitarian. It's not about, annihilating one group of people because you believe you're superior to them, because you have a whiter skin. because you believe that your scripture has said you are the chosen people. So this is what it's about. And we're not dissing you because you're a Jewish person and being proud of being Jewish. You know, you have your rights, as do we, but we are saying stop the genocide. We are saying anti-Zionism. We are not, we're not anti-Jewish at all. We as Muslims believe and respect all other religions and all people of God. We as Muslims believe that when you take one life, you are actually you're taking out the whole of humankind. Life is sacred to us. Not what we're seeing on the TV, not what we're seeing on mainstream media of what the Zionists are doing to the Palestinian people, innocent men, women, and children, and very especially the children. It is absolutely inhumane. And trying to annihilate them by cutting off food supplies, water supplies, fuel supplies, and I think worst of all, absolutely worst of all, bombing of hospitals. That is totally unacceptable. The time is 9:36. News and views on Salam Media.